When I was younger, I believed in magic. The world was so open, so full of color upon my wide-eyed gaze. I had many big dreams of what was to come. I grew up happy, an explorer some may say, playing around and experiencing everything for the first time. I couldn't imagine what was about to happen next. I was getting ready that morning. I had prepared my outfit the night before. I was wearing my new pair of sparkly blue jeans and a pink top. My mom and dad had bought me for my birthday at Disney over the summer. I was greeted by the smell of freshly made waffles as soon as I stepped foot out of my room. This was a tradition that my dad had for every first day of school. He always knew Blueberry was my favorite. It's my dog's favorite too. After eating, I made sure to feed my dog and got into my mom's old Chevrolet Blazer. While on the way, I talked to my parents about my goals this year. I mentioned wanting to make new friends and go on that vacation with my dad he had always talked about on my birthday. He always wanted to take me to Juneau, Alaska. This was where he grew up. He had the dream to take me there one day and meet my grandparents. Once we had arrived at school, my mom told me she would pick me up that day since my dad would be in the shop working late that evening. I hugged my parents goodbye and ran into the yard to find my friend. It was September 7th, 1998, when the accident occurred. My parents had been in a car crash while arguing on the way back from dropping me off on the first day of school. I was excited that year. I was going into the third grade. Before this, my parents fought at home. I didn't think much of it until I was told about the accident by my aunt that same evening. That week was the most difficult week of my life. I couldn't bear the guilt I had. Was it my fault? Every photo in our house was of my parents' travels before they settled down here in our small town. They seemed happy, a young married couple in love. Nothing out of the ordinary. If I wasn't born, would this have ever happened? After that, I spent my whole life looking for something or someone to fill the void. I was living with my aunt at the time, but it didn't feel the same. I had lost everything. My childhood home, and all the memories that filled those walls. My aunt was allergic to dogs, therefore, we had to rehome my dog as well. All of this was so hard considering I was only 9 years old. As the year went by, I started doing less of what I loved, which was learning about cars and the parts within. This was because of the memory of my dad still haunted me. I couldn't even walk by a shop anymore without tears running down my cheeks. I'd watch my friends get dropped off at school by their parents, and it'd bring me so much pain to the point that I isolated myself so much. I never talked much after the accident. I considered myself to be quite a loner.
Do you remember anything else from your childhood?
I don't remember much going forward. All I remember is the senior year of high school. I was coming close to graduating and wondered what I should do with the rest of my life. This was difficult for me since I never paid much attention to my future or who I was going to become before. The only partial skills I had were what my dad had taught me at a young age. This small knowledge eventually led me to work at my dad's mechanic shop in town. That choice was hard. I wanted to give up so badly, but I knew deep down that my father would have hated if his shop went to waste. I started working at my dad's shop that summer and everything was fine. Somehow I felt so connected to him. He wasn't there, but it always felt as though he was. I knew something was off because his office had been untouched since his passing. I never had the guts to move any of his stuff out. Without touching anything, I moved into the office. The smell of his cologne still lingered in the room, and the pictures of my mom were still on his desk covered in dust. My dad also never fixed the humming sound coming from the ceiling. That sound always drove me nuts every time I went to visit. After a month had passed working at the shop, I came across the offer to move back into the trailer park my parents lived in. This was my childhood home. I didn't pass this up. That week, I packed my things to my aunt's and moved in. The home was different from the previous owners. Despite this, I found myself again. The memories started returning. I finally felt like myself for the first time in years. A sense of relief. It was tough, nevertheless. I was living alone in my childhood home. Something wasn't right. Subsequently, I ended up adopting a cat. His name was Eeyore. He brought me so much comfort and provided a sense of warmth. Despite the small sprinkle of joy in my life, the days started to blend as one big ring of fire. I found it hard to distinguish Monday from Friday. I would wake up late and barely make it to work on time. Mac and cheese boxes piled up on the counter and a mess all around.
Put down the paper and tell me what's truly on your mind.
You know,
Don't worry, Margaret. This is a safe place. No one else will know this information but me.
the thing is, I wish I could explain what's truly going on inside my head. One day, when I went to work, this gentleman was walking in. His name was Hunter. I knew from reading his name tag on his lab coat. Those iridescent blue eyes immediately locked with mine. All I remember was talking briefly about the problem with the bushings on his old Ford Bronco. He handed me his keys and our team got to work.
Okay, now put down the paper and tell me how you felt in that moment.
Well, I felt like a character in a movie, seeing the love of her life for the first time. A slow motion video of some sort. The next week, I got a call from a random number. It was him, Hunter. It was so out of the blue, I was shocked. We went on that date, and I knew he was the one.
And how did you know he was the one?
It's corny, but I knew right away. He even brought me flowers when he picked me up at my place. As the night went on, I learned about his hobbies and the whole lab coat thing was about. He's working at the local pharmacy. He also had been living in this small town. He told me he dreamed of moving to the big city, but that dream suddenly died. After that, we dated for a while, and it had been a month in when Hunter and I had been dating for a month when I found out I was pregnant with his child. I was so scared since it had only been a month. One whole month. I held the secret in for weeks until I finally built up the guts to tell him the truth. Becoming pregnant had been one of my biggest fears since I was a child. This was due to the fact that I didn't want my kid to grow up and feel the same way I did when I was younger. I knew I was depressed, and someone who had been previously before. The next part of the story was the second most difficult thing I had to do. I told Hunter about me being pregnant around the second month of us being together. As soon as the words left my mouth, all I could remember was yelling and countless arguments. Hunter had lost it. Within all the screaming and shouting, I only recall one phrase, which was, "Get an abortion or I'm leaving you." Those words stuck with me. At this moment, I had to make a choice. Him or my unborn baby. We were still dating a week after telling him the news. I just ignored everything he said. I thought if I just avoided this whole thing, it would all go away. Unfortunately, this wasn't the case. Every morning, I would wake up to my boyfriend calling me to see if I'd booked an appointment with the OBGYN yet to abort my baby. This went on for 2 days until Hunter came over one night and ended it all. He came knocking on my door, all angrily in an abusive manner. I didn't even bother to open the door. I could hear everything up through the dog door. From that day forward, I dedicated my life to my baby.
You know, your life is all about the choices we make every day. Sometimes small ones, some big. But what counts is we move forward and try not to regret our past. Something to consider is all those choices affect us and our lives in all different shapes, ways, and forms. Do you think that's true?
I mean, yes.
Okay then, if your choices change your life and even yourself, don't you think the most important thing is to go along with those choices?
I mean, maybe you are right.
In the end, you did choose your baby. this brings me to my final question. Do you regret this?
Not even for